right, ladies and gentlemen, we have finally hit the second half mark of version 2.0, and I'm gonna finally do something that I've been putting off for a while, right? Something that I could have easily done at the start of 2.0, but then I would have had to update it for Roccia. And today what we're going to be doing, ladies and gentlemen, is a tier list for Wuthering Waves 2.0. And the point of this tier list isn't necessarily to gauge a character's raw strength, their raw power, like their raw buffing ability or healing or anything of that sort. But the point of this tier list is going to be focused on value entirely across all of the different areas that we have within the game. Things like overworld farming, things like the actual Tower of Adversity itself, things like holograms, and incorporating all of that into a tier list where you can see who's really worth investing in at this point in the game. A lot of stuff has changed since version 1.0. A lot of new characters have been released, and there are a lot of new synergies. Are there characters that make certain ones easier to use? Are there characters that, really singular in their use case, and because of that, they're maybe not as highly valued, even if they are powerful? That's what we're all going to factor in with the entire roster that we're going to be seeing here. Obviously, Brant and Phoebe are not released yet, right? Considering that they're coming in version 2.1. And so I wanted to take the time to actually address from everybody on the roster where they stand. So with that, we're going to start off with a pretty simple ordering. We're going to go with the limited 5 stars first, as well as the standard 5 stars, and then kind of move onward into the actual 4 stars themselves. And frankly, I think the best way to go about it is to go by release date. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's get it started. So the first character that's going to be up over here is going to be Jiyan, the very first limited character that ever released in the history of Wuthering Waves, right? He came out in version 1.0, and I'm going to be honest, he's only gotten stronger ever since then. He's had the release of new sustains to the roster like Shorekeeper. He even has like some synergy with Yohu as well, with Mortifi on his team. And obviously, he's had the addition of a brand new Echo called the Nightmare Phalian Baringal. And that just lets him cut down his rotation time significantly across his teams. And with enough ER, you can basically have whatever you need on him available at all times. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and, considering his value, right? His ability to work in basically any type of content. He's a best in slot pick for encounters like pincer maneuver warriors. He's best in slot in a lot of different tower stages with a lot of AoE, and he's still good in single target. I'm gonna have to put him in S. And this is why I'm going to put him in S. Because his best in slot teammate is a 4-star. It's Mortifi. He has top tier performance, top tier damage. He is a top speedrunner, even in the highest spots of the meta with the most investment at S0, with a 4-star character. And what this means, ladies and gentlemen, is that he can actually only get stronger from here on out. Imagine that he gets his 5-star buffer, right? Like Xiangli Yao has Yinlin, or like how Carlotta has Zhezhi. He can literally only get stronger from here, but he's still at the top of the meta, especially as you incorporate things like his Qinglong cancels, his double dragon tech, and you really start optimizing his rotations a lot more in his teams. He works amazingly with Verena for faster rotations, but he also works amazingly with Shorekeeper to simply deal more damage during those rotations. And believe me when I say that, again, he's only gotten better with time, and he works in every single bit of content in the game as a 1.0 character. The only area where he struggles a little bit is in the overworld, but guess what? He's a lot better than other characters who struggle more in the overworld because he is liberation reliant. But when he does cast his liberation, well, he's got the best grouping in the game with his liberation. Obviously, Roccia is another close competitor with the grouping that's a lot more frequent and a lot more often. But Jiyan, considering the fact that he's dealing damage at the same time while he's grouping, I would say his is a little bit better, at least while his liberation is in fact up. So with that, that's the reason why I'm going to be putting him in S tier, because he's good with the 1.0 Sonata set. He obviously has room to upgrade that Sonata set with a new one that's as tailored as Carlotta's is, and he's just good in every type of content you can imagine. The only thing he's weak against are certain bosses, like, ironically enough, the Thundering Mephis, but those don't show up too frequently in the tower. And he does have a problem when the bosses have too many parryable attacks, because that can eat into his liberation uptime. But he's still dominating to this day, and like I mentioned before, right, he's best in slot with a 4-star character. you can't really go wrong with him as long as you're optimizing his full potential. Next up, we have somebody that I think is going to be a little bit more controversial, and that character is Yinlin. And let me just say that Yinlin, unfortunately, she hasn't aged very well, primarily due to the fact that pretty much every other sub DPS that we've been seeing thus far released after her, characters like Zhezhi and Roccia, they're a lot smoother to play. They're a lot easier to activate their abilities with. Yinlin has a lot of need to do things like swap cancels. I mean, obviously she has like nice animations, but the thing is, her liberation doesn't actually fully stop time. It stops time for like half of the animation, and then you'll see while she's still, you know, doing like that thing in the background, the enemies will like start moving. And so she doesn't even have full time stop like other characters in the game. And so there are just simply a lot of downsides with playing her. You can optimize her rotations, but they're a lot more complicated than other characters as well. And although she has increased in power with the addition of the new Sonata set, and I know that she is, you know, a pretty attractive character design, she has a lot of clunk to her. She has a lot of clunk in that trunk. And the end result is that, well, she sometimes feels like she's just not good in certain types of content, specifically single target, where her concerto energy in single target builds up like a fucking snail. I'm going to be honest. You have to feed her so many intro skills for her to feel right in a lot of different areas. And that means that when you're using teams like Shorekeeper, like in Xiangli Yao, sometimes her rotations feel like they take forever. And obviously, that's like one of the most optimal teams that she can be played in. And it's really easy for a lot of her stuff to get canceled, unlike other characters, right? Like Zhezhi. And so because of that, I'm actually going to be putting her in A. I think she is showing signs of age. She is aging far worse than Jiyan. And you can make the argument that she does do significant damage while off field, but I'm gonna be honest, if Yinlin and her weapon banner were up, I'd say don't pull Yinlin, just pull her weapon instead. And that would be the best advice you could give somebody that's starting the game after 2.0. Don't pull Yinlin, pull her weapon instead. I know that this can be a little bit controversial, but let's be honest, guys. Yinlin is probably the clunkiest character in the game for a limited 5-star. One of the clunkiest in the game. So, next up, we've got obviously somebody who is on banner for Wuthering Waves 2.0. And that's going to be Jinhsi. And Jinhsi, I'm going to go ahead and give her a ranking that's below Jiyan, but still an S tier. The reason for this is that Jinhsi has a lot of very high single target damage, a moderate amount of grouping, but when it comes to certain types of content in the game, gosh, she kind of sucks. The content that I'm talking about that she sucks in is multi-wave content, like pincer maneuver warriors, like some of the other combat events that we've had in the past, where her nuke can very easily overkill enemies and it won't transfer forward into future waves. And she will, 1000% at full build, overkill the shit out of enemies in the overworld as well. And so she's awesome in the Tower of Adversity. She's one of the top picks in the tower for a reason. But again, like I mentioned before in the tier list, this is going to incorporate everything into a character, not just their performance in the tower. She's one of the best characters for holograms, and she's also one of the best characters in the tower, but she is kind of not that great in other forms of content. She does, again, high damage single target burst, but guess what? You use this character in pincer maneuver warriors, you're gonna have a shit time. You're gonna have a shit time unless you pair her with another DPS character that can shore up her weaknesses. 1000%. She's too much damage, so she's bad? That's literally not what I said. It's too much damage for a single nuke to be used in AoE or multi-wave content, which is, let's be honest here, pincer maneuver warriors is an endgame mode. But she is really, really useful in the tower. If that nuke hits every enemy, that literally cannot happen in multi-wave. It literally cannot happen in multi-wave. And this is another thing, guys, that we have to factor in when it comes to Jinhsi. She needs specialized teammates to reach her full potential. She needs specialized teammates to reach her full potential. She needs coordinated attackers on the team. And she naturally has a little bit less synergy with characters like Shorekeeper, who kind of like buffs almost every character on the roster instead of her. You actually get better performance with Verena in most cases compared to Shorekeeper, assuming, right, that you don't have critical stats that are going to make, you know, like somebody cry. And that's what you have to factor in. She requires coordinated attacks to work, and that is at a baseline, right? Less flexibility overall. She still has like a pretty good teammate in Zhezhi, but she still also doesn't have her optimal teammate, right? One that buffs either resonance skill damage way more than Zhezhi, like 38% like Tao Chi, while having off-field coordinated attacks, but it's a bit of a weird pick. to use Tao Chi with her, and you want somebody that's off element. She has like some weird specifications in her kit that make her scaling in the future and beyond, you know, a little bit dicey potentially. You also have to factor in though that she had the advantage before of the Jue Echo skill, which is when you would just like shit out in the middle of your rotation and gain the full benefits from. That was her advantage over other DPS characters. But now with the addition of the Nightmare Echoes, she doesn't really have that anymore. Right? Every other character now just has like a summonable echo that's super easy to use, or they get the full bonuses of right away. And so she's even like lost that edge that she had over other characters now that we've hit 2.0 and Nightmare Echoes have been released. So that's why I'm actually putting her in the second. She's still an S, guys, but she's not as strong as she was before compared to other characters, because like I mentioned, every other DPS in the game has been elevated as a result of the Nightmare Echoes, except for her. And again, we're thinking about this from a value tier list. Value being the key word here. Next up, boy, oh boy, oh boy. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. We have Changli. And I'm going to give some honest facts about Changli. Changli has gotten stronger since version 2.0 with the addition of the Inferno Rider Echo skill. That gives a bonus to resonance skill and fusion damage that heavily benefits her kit, and the fact that you don't have to activate it in the middle of her intense quick swap rotations is what makes her a bit stronger nowadays. However, one thing that I do want to factor in is the fact that Changli, ladies and gentlemen, isn't like other DPS characters. You can't put Changli in with like a half-built support or a support that's just on Moonlit Clouds and expect the team to do well. Because of that fact, and especially considering that she might be on banner soon, I'm going to go ahead and put her at the top of A tier for this reason. And this is the main reason. Changli requires a built DPS character as her teammate to function properly. If Changli doesn't have another fully built DPS teammate to partner with, she's not going to do very well in the content. She's going to do very, very badly in the content. She also has a very, very high skill floor and requires a very different way of playing the game called Quick Swap to even be at a damage level that matches the performance of the other two characters that you're seeing over here. She requires a lot more sort of like muscle memory and practice to get like a baseline level of performance out of her. And because of that, and their need for a massive amount of investment on the entire team for her to function properly, it is, again, right, considering that this tier list is focused on value, I can't really be placing her that high, at least on the level of S. Because I think of an S tier character as somebody, once you pull them and build them, they will change your account, right? They will allow you to do things you haven't been able to do before, and they will let you, you know, complete all the content, unlock all the rewards, get all of the astrite possible. And she doesn't really do that. Nobody pulls Changli and then they go from like an 18 out of 30 to a 30 out of 30 on the tower. That doesn't happen. It simply does not. But pulling a character like Jiyan or Jinhsi and having them fully built, that will let you go from 18 out of 30 to 30 out of 30 on the tower. Changli doesn't do that at all. And so I think I'm actually going to put her behind Yinlin for now, because Yinlin will enable a lot more teammates than Changli does. And I think that's going to be the final rating. We also could be sort of moving around some of the rankings later. Let's just put her in B for now. All right. Next up, we're moving on to version 1.2, and that's going to be Zhezhi. And let me be honest, when I say that Zhezhi, ladies and gentlemen, she's good. She's really good. She's incredibly good. Incredibly easy to play. Has some requirements on the ER side, but guess what, guys? Zhezhi can also be a character that's half built and gets a lot of performance out of her. She's S tier easily. She is, in my opinion, currently the best sub DPS character in the game, at least for limited 5 stars. Primarily due to the fact that A, she works with some of the top tier characters. She amplifies their damage like crazy. B, she's incredibly easy to get baseline performance out of. You get 130% ER on her, put her on Moonlit Clouds, and you don't care about her stats, and she will support characters like Carlotta and Jinhsi perfectly. She will support them perfectly, and she even has some higher potential skill cap techniques in her kit, like the jump cancels of her E, to make her rotation almost instant. And when you compare it to a character like Yinlin or Roccia, my gosh, she's faster than both of them. The only weakness that she has is being slightly single target oriented, because her ultimate with the Inklet Spirits, they go only after one target that you attack at a time, because they can't really hit an AoE because they have an internal cooldown of 1 second before firing another one. And so because of that, she does have a little bit of weakness in multi-wave content. or not multi-wipe, in AoE content, but this is also the other thing. When she kills one target, it doesn't mean that the mark expires, like with Yinlin. When Yinlin kills a target, her coordinated attacks will disappear. Zhezhi's, on the other hand, will continue and switch from target to target. And that means that, hey, it can be a lot more convenient in different types of content to use her. And because her coordinated attacks are tied to her liberation, guess what, guys? They can't be canceled. It's not like Yinlin where you can like miss a swap and then you sit down and get smacked and then the coordinated attacks and your entire Forte circuit disappears. Zhezhi is invulnerable during the entire animation of the best part of her kit, which is, again, her liberation and her coordinated attacks. And then she has even more potential to scale her damage like crazy as you invest in things like the Empyrene Anthem set. And overall, she's just, at the moment, the most complete DPS character in the game. And when you have her on Yinlin's signature String Master, she's one of the easiest characters to build in the game as well. On her signature, on the other hand, she's a lot harder to work with because that doesn't give 36% crit rate. It gives 72% critical damage, but you have to crit to do your critical damage. So I actually recommend for most players, use Zhezhi with Yinlin's signature, and you'll probably, most of the time, have an easier to build set, and it'll feel better to use as well. Ironically enough, I know it sounds crazy. Zhezhi's personal damage, I think, isn't as high as Yinlin's, especially not in AoE, but guess what, guys? That's not really you typically have teammates like Jinhsi or Carlotta who do enough AoE damage to get her by, and then she's probably one of the better single target boss slayers as well, to have those coordinated attacks work alongside. And obviously, right, she has the benefit of providing energy to her main DPS, the recipient of her outro skill, as well. And that's super viable for characters like Carlotta too. So she's just one of the best enablers in the game, and frankly, does a lot for her teams. All right, let's move on now to Xiangli Yao. Oh, Xiangli Yao. The free character released in version 1.2 that a lot of people got for free, and a lot of people have the signature weapon for. And I think you all know what I'm going to say about this guy. Again, considering that this tier list is focused on value, considering how this tier list is focused on who you should build on your account, I think he's actually up here above Jinhsi, and maybe above Jiyan as well. The reason for this is that Xiangli Yao might not do as much damage as these characters. You can make that a statement. But damage in this game isn't so important to the point where just because somebody has the highest damage, it means that they're the best character. Xiangli Yao has so much built-in utility, both in things like his time slowdown, the grouping on his liberation, and his absurd mobility as well. Xiangli Yao has mobility during his liberation through his E, where he uppercuts the enemy, and then does like the little like 1,000 blades cut attack. And then he has another gap closer whenever he throws a hypercube, where he will dash up right into an enemy's face from across the map and then throw a hypercube right in their face. He has an insane amount of just like quality of life, it feels like, built into his kit that makes him usable in every single wave of content in the game. You have a multi-wave situation, okay, his liberation blows up the initial wave, and then he has 3 hypercubes to defeat the rest of the multi-wave content as it comes in. Is it boss content? Well, he just nukes them all the same and then launches 3 hypercubes in their face. His damage is a little bit lower, but it's split out in such a convenient way that lets him tackle any content and any encounter in the game. And he alone is the reason why that Yinlin, in my opinion, is actually able to even stay in A tier, because Yinlin is so good with him that he elevates her. Otherwise, I think if Xiangli Yao wasn't in the game, Yinlin could be a solid B based off how clunky she is. But her clunk is worth it just to enable him in content. Because when these two characters are combined, oh my gosh, you're able to clear basically anything that isn't electro resistant. This might be one of the strongest duos in the game based off of just sheer flexibility and how much content they can actually do. And I mean, if you have the chance to use him himself, use him. He's good with the Abyss Surges. He's good with the BP weapon. He's good, obviously, with his signature. And you just get so much mileage out of building this guy, maxing his skills out. Use him in the tower. Use him in pincer. You use him in the overworld if you have enough ER. And he even has good gap closing with his regular Forte circuit. And still decent damage as well. And so he just has a little bit of everything that makes him, in my opinion, the jack of all trades for all of the content in the game. He doesn't have as much damage, right, as these characters. But hey, he's like 5 to like 6% less than those guys. He was given out for free, and he has so many more advantages on the quality of life side in his actual gameplay that makes him just a top tier character to use and a top tier character to build. If you have a weapon that works for him, he is a must build character. Literally. And another reason for that is he's Changli's current best partner. At least for like people that are beginning to learn quick swap. He is so flexible that he's able to be used in dual DPS with characters like Havoc Rover, with characters like Encore, and even Carlotta as well. And he gets decent performance out of all those different teams, all those different lineups. His best one is easily with Changli, and it's just really, really, really good. He's really, really, really flexible. You can use him in a lot of different ways. Oh, and I forgot the last thing. He got heavily buffed as well with the addition of the new Void Thunder Nightmare Thundering Mephis, where now he gets a Resonance Liberation damage buff and Electro buff simply for existing, and he can use the Echo skill at the end of all his rotations, and it's perfectly fine. He now has an actual best in slot Sonata set, and it is easily Void Thunder. The only clunky thing is you have to throw a heavy attack in the middle of his rotation, but it takes like a quarter of a second to prime it up. It's not that hard, it's not that complicated, and you get a lot out of him. So he's only gotten stronger, again, since release. Only gotten stronger, much like Jiyan. All right, so we've covered all the characters up until 1.2. Now let's get into 1.3. Shorekeeper is the apex tier for value, the apex tier for a pull, apex tier for value. Or like in terms of like who you need to build on your account. She's the first limited support, and she's really fucking good. She buffs things like critical rate, critical damage. She does decent personal damage on her own, and she's incredibly easy to build just to maximize her buffs. And if you build her and hyper optimize her completely, the thing is she has a low ceiling as well and a high floor. You're gonna get maybe 30k extra damage per rotation from fully building her. And ladies and gentlemen, 30k extra damage isn't that much. And so even if you just put her at 230% ER with the fallacy and then just kind of have like shit stats everywhere else, you'll still get at least like 90 to 95% of her value. She is, in my opinion, the only must pull character in the game because she is like the super max version of Baizha. And Baizha's a 4-star character with a lot of clunk built into her kit that feels really clunky to use. She will still clear content, Baizha, but she feels like ass to use. While Shorekeeper, on the other hand, makes your other characters feel better to use. And overall, easy to build. Just get ER up to 230, put her on variation, and the other flip side of it is that her signature, Stellar Symphony, isn't even a must pull either. A lot of people have it, right, because they want the attack buff, but ladies and gentlemen, a variation will suit you just fine, and you'll be running her perfectly well without her signature. You never even need to pull it. And obviously, right, she has a big impact in the story too. So there's always that bonus as well. But in my opinion, this is the only must-pull character in the game, and it hasn't changed since her release, because we still haven't seen another limited support since then. All right, next up, we're gonna have, ladies and gentlemen, Camellya. And I'm going to be ranking Camellya above Jinhsi. And I think I'll rank her above Jiyan. The reason why I am putting Camellya up here is the fact that her raw damage potential is incredibly high. She does a lot of damage. She has a lot of different rotations that she can use. And she also has, well, not best in slot anymore, but a very, very strong 4-star option in Sanhua. And the Sanhua Camellya team, along with a character like Shorekeeper or Verena, absolutely destroys any content in the game that isn't Havoc resistant. It's incredibly strong. And Camellya obviously still works really, really, really well with the standard 5-star sword. She is actually one of the best DPS characters in the game with Emerald of Genesis on her. You don't actually need her signature with proper echo investment to absolutely blow stuff up. Obviously, with her signature, she goes like super max mode and does a shit ton of damage, but she does fall behind Xiangli Yao, in my opinion, primarily due to the fact that Xiangli Yao does do a little bit less damage than her, but he has so much additional utility, and she does have occasions, right, where she doesn't feel that great against certain enemies. It is important to keep in mind, though, that I might bump her up due to the fact that she does work a lot better with the standard weapon, and she has probably the best free-to-play option in the game in terms of gearing. She does have the best free-to-play option in the game in terms of gearing. And so, kind of like going in with that whole value perspective, I would put Camellya just above the rest of these characters, because guess what? The standard 5-star sword gives attack, ER, and critical rate. Those are all stats that she needs. And having that ER on it actually loosens her requirement to liberate every rotation, and the crit rate obviously is great for her kit, because she needs to crit to deal damage. Red Spring is actually one of the lowest priority signatures in the game. A lot of people have it though because they like Camellya, but it is one of the lowest priority signatures in the game. That's Camellya Sig, because she already has a great option with Emerald of Genesis, and people are just clearing content easily with her on it, but they're probably going to pull the Sig anyways because they want her to do more damage. She's a little bit harder to play though than Xiangli Yao for sure on field. You'd have to make sure that you're dodging very frequently on her, and she doesn't have the same time slowdown effects as Xiangli Yao. But the fact that she is one of the most affordable DPS characters in the game is why she's getting this top tier ranking right under Shorekeeper. All right, cool. Now, it's time to move on to version 2.0 itself. And it's time to talk a little bit about Carlotta. Some people are not going to be happy with this placement. Carlotta is S tier, but I think she's below Jinhsi. And you want to know why? Because this character sucks ass in AoE. This character fucking sucks in AoE. She's worse than Jinhsi in AoE. She might do more single target damage than many other characters on this list. But guess what, guys? She's good in holograms and she's good in the tower. And she feels pretty fucking bad everywhere else. She feels pretty bad everywhere else. Let's be honest here. She has very easy rotations. She's very easy to use. And she does have a couple of like 4-star options, but none of the 4-star options really feel particularly amazing with her. Her and Zhezhi combined feel awesome, but that is like the premium, super expensive team. And this is the other thing, ladies and gentlemen. If you try using her in this version of Pincer Maneuver Warriors, you might actually blow a gasket in real life. Because with this version of Pincer Maneuver Warriors, with 3 enemies spawning and like 10 waves, oh, she's not good. She's not good. She was good in the last version of Pincer because it was like 4 mobs of elites and her liberation had no cooldown at all. But guess what? If you're pulling this character and she's the only DPS character on your account, you're gonna struggle to clear all of the content in the game. Jiyan or Xiangli Yao will clear the tower, and they'll also clear Pincer. They'll also clear holograms. Carlotta will clear holograms and the tower, and she won't clear other content in the game. And remember, this is a value tier list. If you want Carlotta to clear the tower, ladies and gentlemen, you need to pair her with another DPS character. And if you are pairing Carlotta with another DPS character, the only thing you're doing is putting on a band-aid to her AoE weakness. And now the other DPS character is the one clearing tower. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I cleared with Changli and Carlotta. No, you didn't clear with Changli and Carlotta. Changli cleared, and Carlotta helped out a little bit. That's what's happening in Pincer. It's not Carlotta clearing. And so because of that, right, the fact that you need to basically slot her in with a second DPS, it's the same as the Changli issue in that type of content. She is probably the best character for the TOA, the best character in the TOA. But the fact that she has so many glaring weaknesses in other game modes, I can't rank her as high as characters that excel in both of them when she only excels in one type of content. I don't think she's a high value pull if you're trying to get the most bang for your buck. If you want to get the most bang for your buck, these 3 characters will give you a lot more for 160 pulls potentially. Jinhsi doesn't excel in Pincer either. That's why she's the second lowest DPS. Jinhsi and Carlotta are the 2 lowest DPSs in S tier. Jinhsi is better than Carlotta because Jinhsi has way better AoE. Jinhsi's AoE isn't amazing, but it is better than Carlotta's. 1000%. Placing this much emphasis on Pincer is whack. 1. Not unusable in Pincer anyways. Value equals wise. TOA cycles more often for more astrites. We've had Pincer every patch, 2 times a patch. You can pretend it's not there, but it is there. And guess what? You want to know why you guys hate Pincer Maneuver Warriors? Everybody's saying that they hate Pincer Maneuver Warriors. Do you want to know why they're saying they hate it? They don't have one of these 3 characters built. That is the only reason why you guys are saying that. You don't have one of these 3 characters built. That's the only reason. You're bringing your fucking Jinhsi in there and you're like, oh my fucking god, I can't do enough. I don't have my shit up when I need it. That's because the character sucks in the game mode. You bring the Carlotta in there and you're like, oh my gosh, why do I only have 4 shots? I'm taking too long to get my liberation up. That's because she sucks in the game mode. That's just how it is. And yeah, you can slot in other characters on their teams to make them better. But these characters just, you take the same team into the tower, you take the same team into pincer, and it's perfectly fine. You don't need to change anything with these lineups. You just take their tower teams and you plop them into pincer maneuver warriors, and they perform fine. You're like fucking experimenting around with different team comps when it comes to these characters to make them work properly. All right, and now for the last limited character. We've got the first half of 2.0 on here. We've got the last one. Rossia's B. Rossia's B. You want to know why? Because she is, at least in terms of damage, slightly better than Sanhua for team rotations. She has grouping. Yes, she does have grouping. But I'm going to be honest, guys. Camellya kinda doesn't really need grouping. Because Camellya's Blossom form has one of the largest fucking AoEs in the game. And if you simply position yourself properly, you'll hit all the enemies in the content that you do need to hit enemies in. S6 Sanhua is a fine alternative to her that doesn't necessarily require you, right, to do anything crazy. To activate her buffs, and Roccia needs a ridiculous amount of investment to actually work in the first place. She needs an absurd amount of investment to actually work in the first place and to reach her full damage potential. The main draw of her, and the reason why she's not in C, to be honest, is because, well, she's the best overworld character in the game. And obviously, she's great in pincer if using a character like Havoc Rover, or Camellya as well. She's the best overworld character in the game, 1000%. And you can always view it from the perspective of, well, if you're spending a lot of time overworld farming, then she's going to be a really, really great pick for you. But the thing is, it's like, well, that also means that you're only playing one team in the overworld. And if you're kind of like at that stage where you're like only using one team, like Camellya, Roccia in the overworld, and then nothing really else, you could find that getting like a little bit stale kind of quickly. You obviously can pair her with other teammates too, like Xiangli or like Xiangli Yao or something, and you just won't use her outro skill buffs, and that's perfectly fine as well, right? So I think she's a permanent slot in on any overworld team due to the fact that she has grouping available all of the time. She has grouping pretty much with no cooldown at all. It's like 6 seconds, and then she can even use her heavy attack to do their bounces in group 2. And her AoE is pretty large on the tornadoes, and then on outro skill, she grants the tornado to whoever comes in. But I would say, if you already have S6 Sanhua, she isn't enough of an improvement to be worth pulling in the tower, but she is a huge quality of life improvement for overworld farming and like basically everything outside of the tower. But the thing is, when you have an amazing 4-star option that gives you pretty comparable damage buffs, it's like, oh man, we're pulling a character just for grouping at this point. That's kind of what it feels like. And to even get her to the point where her personal damage and buffs are at the level of Sanhua, you've got to invest a lot into her. A lot into her. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be our tier list for all of the limited characters. And so, based off of that, I think we might go ahead and split this video into 2 parts. Otherwise, it's going to be an absolutely absurd, like 2-hour-long clip. So, we'll go ahead and we'll cut the first video over here, right? Looking into every single limited banner from 1.0 all the way to 2.0. And so let me know what you all think about these rankings. Again, this is focused on value. This is focused on what these characters are going to provide to your account. And let me know what you think. Was I wrong in any way? Are there things that are a little bit too controversial over here? And put it down in the comments below. See y'all next time. Peace.